Welcome to part 5 of chapter 9. Part 5 is devoted to developing project teams. I would add developing and training project teams. So, why do you need to develop project teams? It takes teamwork to successfully complete most projects. So, the main goal of team development is to help people work together more effectively to improve project performance. Now, make sure you understand the distinction between development and training, at least the way I understand the distinction. Most researchers, most universities, they call this area training and development, to emphasize that those are different areas. I think training means more like teaching, providing people with instruction, let's say technical skills, while development means not teaching but more like coaching, right? Being like actively involved in people's roles, giving them some feedback, initiating corrective actions, and so forth. So it's like coaching versus teaching, something like that. But both contribute to team performance. Now, when it comes to team development, one theoretical model that is useful is the so-called Tuckman's model of team development. What Tuckman noticed, he noticed that teams or teamwork proceeds in several phases or stages. And by the way, this framework has a lot of useful practical implications. It's not just like one of those theoretical intellectual exercises. So what Tuckman noticed, he noticed that teams proceed as follows. First of all, teams are getting formed. This is the formation phase. So this is when a project manager finds people to work together on a particular project. Now, once this team is formed, meaning the membership in this team is finalized, the team starts storming. So storming is like brainstorming. People start coming up with different ideas on how to do things. They just create different solutions, different plans. So this is like that brainstorming phase. And also during teamwork, after all those ideas are generated, there is this norming. Norming means the team converges on a set of tactics, techniques, and plans, right? Because people may have different ideas, but eventually each team needs to decide what exactly they're going to do. Conflicts may happen in this phase because people will be walking out saying, well, it's my way or the highway. If you don't like what I'm proposing, then maybe I'll quit. So conflict is quite normal during the norming phase. And once things settle, the team starts performing, right? Already you see the implication. Before team starts actually doing something useful, right? They will go through all those stages, and all those stages take time. I mean, sometimes people will argue for weeks on what needs to be done before everything starts to normalize, right? So you cannot expect teamwork from day one. And then I use this like just something something that came to my mind. I mean, I use this all the time in my courses. You see, like when the semester starts, you cannot expect student teams to start performing from day one. You need to give them some time to form their teams. So I'm saying like, well, you have 1 week to submit your team information. Then you have the storming and norming. I do some team exercises to kind of encourage storming and norming. So in other words, before I even give them a team project, I ask students to do something together. So that's so that they have their conflicts, they get to know each other, they accept some shared norms of behaviors, and only then we start actually working on the project, right? In the corporate world, organizations again they allow for that. They may start a project with some social, like internal recruitment, right? They will do some social functions first, where people get together, they talk about things, right, and then the project formally starts, sometime later. And then adjourning. Adjourning is the last phase. So when your team completes work, you need to do some learning exercise so that people can learn from their mistakes. You need to bring up what are the things that went well, what are the things that didn't go well, because if you don't do that, then the team will keep making the same mistakes. So adjourning, that learning concluding phase, is very important. When it comes to managing student teams, I always have some kind of peer review component at the end of every group project, so that people learn how others perceive their work, so that they learn something from the teamwork exercise, right? In the corporate world, unfortunately, that adjourning phase is often skipped because sometimes people just don't have time to do those things, and especially if you're making use of external consultants, once they deliver their project, they just move on to another organization, another project, so there is no time for adjourning. But again, if you don't learn from your mistakes, then you will never improve. This is one of the most important success factors. You don't have to be smart, you don't have to be very talented. All you need to do to be successful, you need to learn from your mistakes and make sure you don't repeat them again. So adjourning is an important phase. So make sure, like when you manage teams, make sure you keep those norms in mind. I mean, at the minimum, understand that your team cannot start performing from day one. Give them some time for forming, storming, and norming. And if you're very wise, strategic team manager or manager, then you will also include the adjourning phase where people learn from their mistakes, they improve, so that next time when you assemble this team, when people work together, they don't make the same mistakes. Okay, training. All kinds of training can be provided to individuals, and also training can be done at the team level to help people understand themselves, understand each other, and how to work better in teams. Some organizations, they invest into team building activities, for example, some physical challenges where they take the team somewhere, let's say to a forest or to the desert, and they have to perform some team exercise. And that's how they learn about each other, about strengths and weaknesses, people's personalities, who can be trusted, who cannot be trusted. So it helps to do this forming, storming, and norming phase, or facilitate those phases. Some organizations, they use those formal psychometric testing tools to help people understand themselves. By far, the most famous one is the so-called Meyers-Briggs Type Indicator test. It's MBTI is a popular tool for determining personality preferences and helping teammates understand each other. I think in my opinion, the key to becoming successful in your career and also the key to happiness in your own life is trying to understand yourself. Even Greek philosophers, they came with this idea that changing the world requires changing yourself first, right? So if you change yourself, then things around you will change too. But it's very important for like professional and personal happiness to understand who you are, what you like, what you don't like, what are your talents, what are your weaknesses, what you can do, what you cannot do, right? If you do that, you will be happy. I mean, I think to be successful, you need to understand yourself, and you need to find a profession or a niche within your profession where whatever you're doing does not contradict who you are, right? You cannot be successful in something that your personality, your talents are not fine-tuned for. So those kind of tests like Myers-Briggs Type Indicator test, they help you do that. I did this exercise when I was an undergraduate student, and I remember I found it to be quite interesting to find out my personality type. And I know, I forgot all those, there are those letters that basically when you take this test, they will give you this, I think, 4-letter classification for your personality, right? I think one of my biggest problems, and that's something that, I know it myself right now through experience without this test, but I remember this is what test showed, is that I'm not a clear-cut anything, right? I'm somewhere in between, and I think that's what I struggle with, right? Because I don't know where exactly my place is. I can work in both roles, and I can be, I guess, okay or good in different roles. But the ultimate question is which one is the best for me, right? So that's something that makes me struggle with. I've met some people who told me. I met a gentleman. He is, at that time he was the head of Nashville Technology Council, and he was a graduate of Murray State University. And also during his studies at MSU, somebody told him or required him to take this test. And he said that was the most useful thing that he did in his educational career. When he took this test, he discovered that he's more of an extrovert, outgoing person who likes to talk to people. So he quit being this tech support, this techie guy, and he became more like a sales executive in the technology sector. And according to him, this made him very happy and successful. So I don't require you to do that, but I encourage you to take this test. If you go to the additional materials section in Canvas, you will see an Excel sheet under this name. So there are 100 questions. You need to answer each question, and after you answer each question, it will give you your personality classification and some short description of your personality, so that you can understand better who you are. Again, I don't want to generalize, but research shows that ENTs or rationals are attracted to technology fields. IT people, of course, IT people vary from the most general population in not being extroverted or sensing. I'm not that knowledgeable in those acronyms myself, like personality acronyms, but there's this general belief that people who go into the IT industry, they tend to be very analytical. In other words, they can understand code and can understand complex equations, but they cannot do sensing. They cannot understand people, their feelings, right? If that's the case, then you will have hard time managing people, because managing people requires dealing with emotions, with subjectivity, something that doesn't fit any algorithm, any equation, right? Sometimes people contradictory, right? And you need to be comfortable with that. So taking this test will help you to understand what your strengths and weaknesses are. But in my opinion, if you're more on the analytical side, it doesn't mean that you're absolutely blind to people's emotions. You can still develop that. I mean, intellectually, you can force yourself to think about people's emotions, how they feel, why they say certain things that do not make sense to you, right? So that can be a very useful exercise. So go to Canvas, download that Excel sheet, take it, and I'm sure you'll find it. At least you'll find it interesting, right? And a lot of people find it very useful for their lives and careers. By the way, MBTI test is not the only one. There are all kinds of other classifications and tests, like social styles profile test. I'm not familiar with this particular test. I haven't done it myself, but it classifies people into 4 quadrants, and most IT professionals, they fall into this analytical quadrant. And sometimes when IT professionals have to work with people who are more expressive, like people who work in sales, they find them very noisy, very aggressive. I'm probably somewhere between here, but I remember, like, I had a coworker who was very expressive, and I know she was a very nice person, but it was very difficult for me to deal with her. I mean, she could start crying sometimes in the office if she's upset about certain things going awkward in her job, and she was one of the sweetest, one of the best coworkers and friends I had. But she was just so expressive, and she had this need to express herself, her feelings, and all those things. So she was very difficult to deal with on the emotional level, right? You had to comfort this person, you have to be sensitive to her emotional state and all those things. So that's something that creates conflict. Again, you need, as a project manager, you need to understand those personality types, and you need to deal with it. Otherwise, people will be fighting, and they will never understand each other. So this concludes part 5 of chapter 9. Thank you for listening.